Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar. I'm excited to be joined by Candace Cody from CauseVox, where we're going to be talking about 2021 fundraising strategies designed to help you raise more this year, which such an awesome topic, and really appreciate you coming, Candace. While we have more people getting signed on, and while we get everybody getting logged on, I am going to give just a couple quick housekeeping notes. So number one, this session will be recorded and we'll be sending it out to everyone who registered tomorrow, likely tomorrow morning. Typically takes about 24 hours or so for us to get the recording, get everything packaged up and get it out to you guys. In addition, Candace is going to send me a PDF of the slides after the presentation. We'll be providing those in the email that you can download. So no need to necessarily take feverish notes or anything like that. Or if you want to see something here that you want to share with a board member or a colleague, feel free to do that. Secondly, we know there's going to be questions throughout. So if you look over at your GoToWebinar control panel, and you'll see about the 5th tab down is a little tab where you can expand, a little arrow that you can hit questions. If you just click on that, you can drop questions in anytime you have them. And we will do our best, or I'm going to do my best through the presentation to just kind of find themes in those questions. And I'm going to send Candace through a little bit of a fire drill exercise at the end of the presentation, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we can. So again, for those who just joined, we're going to be talking about 2021 fundraising strategies designed to help you raise more this year. And Candace Cody from CauseVox is here. And Candace, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bradley. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so I'm going to get started and just dive into our webinar today, which is 2021 fundraising strategies designed to help you raise more this year. A little bit about me. My name is Candace and I run content and education at CauseVox. And so for the last 6 years, I've worked with thousands of organizations to help them get their digital fundraising up and running. And so a little bit more about CauseVox. So you can use CauseVox to power up your virtual fundraising. So we have donation pages, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer fundraising, and more, all available to help you run your digital fundraising online in less time, with less hassle. So if you are interested, feel free to check out CauseVox. I want to go over just a quick agenda for today. We're going to be hitting 3 main points in today's discussion. So we're going to be talking a little bit about fundraising in today's context. So thinking about, where we are today when it comes to fundraising and how we can really flourish in today's context overall in 2021. And then we're going to go over 3 ways to grow your fundraising, which will frame our 8 fundraising strategies to help you raise more in fundraising in 2021. So let's get started with today's webinar. So I just want to talk a little bit about fundraising in 2021 and where we are all at today. So likely you are probably joining from home. Maybe some of you are in the office, but this last year we've had to completely reimagine the way that we typically work. So we're working from home. A lot of our programs have shifted and a lot of changes have been implemented. So it has been kind of a crazy year, and we're still probably ironing out some of those details about what our programs and services look like today, especially in the virtual space. And similarly, in-person fundraising events are still canceled, unfortunately. So I know a lot of the nonprofits that I chat with, they're still trying to figure out how to transition a lot of their in-person events that they usually do in the springtime now to virtual fundraisers this spring. And the reality is that we still don't know exactly how long this is going to go on. I'm very optimistic where, it does feel like things are getting better. I got the vaccine yesterday, so I'm really happy about that. And so it does feel like, hopefully we can get back to our in-person gatherings, right? But still for the next 6 months or so, we're probably still going to be navigating much of what we're doing in the digital space. So I wanted to just take a quick look at the Digital Outlook report and really digest what the challenges are for nonprofits at the moment. So in 2019 and 2020, budget constraints were the #1 challenge for nonprofits preventing digital advancement. So it seems like for those who have been trying to transition their events virtual or all of their fundraising and programs virtual, budget constraints have been one of the main factors, or the #1 main factor, right, that have prevented that from flourishing. But in years past, 2015 to 2018, nonprofits rated that staff shortage was the #1 challenge. So you might be feeling that at your nonprofit as well. So if you have budget constraints or staff shortage, you're not alone, where there's a lot of other organizations that are trying to navigate fundraising today in the digital space and encountering some obstacles. And so speaking of obstacles, 43% of nonprofits felt that technology shortcomings were an obstacle in 2020 as well. So this speaks to, with this rapid transition to virtual, some organizations have had trouble finding the right technology to really keep up and flourish in today's context. However, there is some good news. According to the M&R benchmarks report, total online revenue grew by 10% in 2020. So there was this huge shift and huge growth in online fundraising specifically last year. And a 10% growth following the 2 years prior was a 23% growth in online revenue. So this is a huge jump, and it really does speak to the overall transition from in-person, a lot of in-person fundraising to the digital space. And overall, actually some good news as well from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project was that donations were actually up 7.6% in 2020. So that's encouraging, where there's a lot of donations coming in because it is such a time of need. And, when you make your asks, it seems to be really hitting your audience where they're at, and they can see that now is a great time to participate and give. So fundraising today, there's actually more donations coming in, and donations are actually the highest they've been in the last 5 years. So they've been growing steadily year over year, and last year it was the most in the last 5 years. So all of this really ties into this idea of what we are calling the Great Convergence. So with the transition to online fundraising and in that space, there was always this overlap of marketing and fundraising. But since COVID, we found that the best digital marketers were the best digital fundraisers. And so a lot of what we're going to be talking about is kind of navigating this overlap, right? So being able to really flourish in fundraising online today in the digital space. So the nonprofits that will withstand the pandemic the best are the ones that are the quickest to adopt a comprehensive digital fundraising strategy. And so we're going to be discussing this and tying some things back to this throughout our conversation, where this is something that we at CauseVox came up with, is the digital fundraising cycle. So it kind of is based on this digital marketing focused approach to fundraising, where you're always trying to attract a wider audience online, and basically using search engine optimization to drive more web traffic, using social media, both organic and paid, digital advertising and more, to just build up a wider audience online. You take an action. So whether that's, engaging with you on social and following you, or leaving you their email address, or whatever it takes to get them to make contact with them. So then you have all of these new contacts and new potential donors in your midst that you can then nurture, and you can engage them with email nurturing campaigns, social media, storytelling, and more, to eventually then get those potential donors to convert to becoming actual donors. So driving them to your donation page, to a specific fundraising campaign or virtual fundraiser that you're doing, and then hopefully continuing this process where you're continuing to nurture those same new donors and continuing to convert them. So keeping them for the long run. So all of this sort of ties back to this idea that donations are a form of commitment and commitment is a journey. So you want to take your donors on a journey with you so they don't just give once, but continue to give again online over and over again. All of this to say there's actually some advantages to fundraising in 2021 that I've noticed. So after talking with a lot of the nonprofits that use our platform, a lot of them have said that they found that there was a lower cost to fundraising online. And so in turn, they actually got a higher return on investment and effort where they're kind of focusing all of their time on their fundraising strategy and improving that instead of, managing the location for their gala and food details. And they're able to invest more time into their mission and growing their fundraising. This also sort of combines with these less administrative tasks where a lot of things online are automated. So a little less work for you as the admin and more automatic donor tracking and receipts and all of that. And advantages of fundraising online as well, especially with events that are taking place virtually. You're actually able to get a wider range of participants and supporters while, if you're having an event and it takes place at a certain location, of course, there's only those people that are near that location that are going to come. But when you have a virtual event, really anyone can join from wherever they are. So there's a lot of advantages to fundraising in today's context. So all of that to say that there are 3 ways to grow your fundraising this year. So we're going to dive into those and then actually get into the details of some specific strategies that you can use. So growing your fundraising is pretty much always tied back to these 3 ideas. I should mention growing fundraising as far as individual giving, right? So, grants, of course, that's separate. But growing your fundraising through individual donations really relies on acquiring more donors. So there's that attract phase and converting those donors. And then increasing donor retention, so nurturing all of those donors so they stay for the long run, and increasing actual those existing donors' gift size. So those are the 3 main pillars of fundraising growth. So let's talk a little bit about new donor acquisition today. So there was an 11.4% increase in new donors. And I thought this was one of the most interesting insights from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, where it really does show that a lot of people are stepping up to the plate right now. And I also think that this ties into that 10% growth in online revenue as well, where a lot of nonprofits are fundraising online for sometimes the first time or really growing their fundraising initiatives online, and they're reaching these new donors that wouldn't have given if they had to go to an event. They can just give online really easily. So it's a great time to invest in donor acquisition strategy because there's such we're in such a time now where that is actually really growing, and I think you have the opportunity to really take advantage of that for your organization. And let's talk a little bit about donor retention. So there's been some hurdles here. You may have heard about this. So overall donor retention was down in 2020, while the average donor retention rate stayed about the same at 44.5%. The bad news was that those donors who gave for the first time in 2019, only 14.2% of them came back in 2020. So there was a huge drop, almost 8% in the retention of those first time donors. So that is not encouraging. But I'm sure you may have heard this statistic before, but it costs nonprofit organizations 200 to 300% more to attract new donors than it does to get a second gift. So donor retention is really important because investing in getting those first-time donors to stay is going to really help you grow and reduce costs in fundraising. The good news though is that 65% of repeat donors are retained, so you can lean into that kind of strategy to get those first-time donors to become repeat donors, and then you're much more likely to retain them for the long run. So you do have the opportunity right now to implement strategies that help you retain more donors in 2021, and I'll get into a few of those recommended strategies in just a bit. And okay, so let's talk about increasing gift size. So the gift retention rate was actually 48%. So as opposed to that 44.5%, that shows that the donors that do stick around are giving more year after year. And so I think gift retention rate is actually one of the things that nonprofits just kind of let happen naturally. But there's a lot of great strategies that you can implement to actually increase the gift retention rate as well. So we're going to be talking about these three main pillars as we talk about growing fundraising throughout 2021. So let's get into my 8 recommended fundraising strategies to help you raise more this year. So I'm going to start off with the basics of donation form optimization. So optimizing your donation form to help you get more donors will help you acquire more donors, but also part of optimizing your donation form also helps you retain donors and increase gift size. So 75% of young donors are turned off by an out-of-date website. Conversion rates increased 50% when form fields were lowered from 4 to 3. And 65% of all fundraising web traffic is mobile and growing each year. That's something that we saw here at CauseVox. So these 3 statistics, and I have a couple more too, all really do show this kind of need to make sure that your donation forms are up to date, are short and sweet and to the point and easy for people to fill out, and heavy emphasis on mobile optimization as well as mobile payments. So 54% of consumers have made a mobile payment in the last year, so using Apple or Google Pay to purchase online. And so that is a huge trend that we've seen. Incorporating into your donation forms can help drive growth as well. And I do want to mention that it's not just about the form itself and making sure that it's easy to use. Of course, that's really important, but the other side of it is about showcasing impact in the content on your page for your donation form. So 68% of donors agree that knowing how their donation makes an impact is important to their gift. So it's not just about the ease of use, right? It's also really about making sure that the content is there to support and encourage that donor to continue to make their gift. And once donors do have a good experience on your donation form, they're 70% more likely to come back if they gave on a branded page on your website. So actually having a great donation form experience that's branded and tailored to your organization makes them come and give again. So you're driving retention just by increasing or optimizing your donation form. So I think that now more than ever, you really need a great donation page for your organization. So one of the things I recommend is just going to your website now or after this webinar and just trying to make a donation yourself and seeing what that experience is like. Maybe try on your phone, see if it's easy to give on your device, and really think about what improvements can be made to make the experience really, really great, because just by making a few tweaks to your form, you can really greatly increase conversion rates, drive up gifts, and retain more donors. So very simple thing to do, but it's really essential. It's never been more essential to have a great donation page. So make sure that your donation page is helping you actually drive more results instead of hindering you, because you don't want a clunky donation form experience to deter donors today. So a couple just quick examples here. Very simple is this donation form on the Land Conservancy of New Jersey's website. You'll see it's embedded right on the page, super easy. The donor it's very easy for them to navigate between monthly recurring and one-time gifts. and really easy to select one of those giving levels. One of the things that I recommend doing is just kind of showcasing that impact as well. So not just having dollar amounts, but also having dollar amounts that tie directly to impact. And so this screenshot is actually from a fundraiser by Skid Row Housing Trust, and they were very specific with what each gift was able to accomplish at their organization at the time. So I know my $75 gift could provide 75 thermometers, and that really does help me feel like I'm making a difference. And so that in and of itself can drive up and increase gift size as well. And so, yeah, just take a look at your page. Make sure it's easy to fill out, not complicated, not too many fields, and you'll be able to help drive more gifts online. All right, so I also, of course, a huge trend right now is peer-to-peer fundraising and virtual fundraising events. I think that these two are really intertwined, so I want to talk about both at once. But these are both acquisition tools and retention tools as well. So these strategies can really help drive both. So we found at CauseVox that organizations that use peer-to-peer fundraising tend to raise twice as much as opposed to crowdfunding campaigns. So peer-to-peer being that you have your supporters. So maybe you turn your volunteers into fundraisers, or you get your board to sign on and create their own personal pages, or just any, returning donors that are really excited to raise funds on your behalf. So you would just want to think about how, yeah, who in your audience you can tap into to become peer-to-peer fundraisers for you, because they can really get the word out about your organization in ways that you can't, because your reach only goes so far. But when you leverage the audience of your supporters, you're able to really exponentially increase the people who are reached with your initiative. And so, yeah, we see that peer-to-peer fundraisers tend to raise about twice as much. And I think that it's actually never been a better time for peer-to-peer fundraising. One of the great things about it is that it's inherently kind of digital focused, where a person can come and create their own personal fundraising page for you, whether that's using a tool like CauseVox or it's using other tools. There's Facebook fundraisers, but whatever tools that you might be using, and activating your community to set up their own pages and share across social media and through their to their own networks. And I also think this is a great time for this because it's also an alternate ask. So for those supporters who might not be able to give again in the same capacities, where it is still a tough time for a lot of people right now, but it's an alternate ask. So if someone can't give in the same capacity that they've given previously, they can always fundraise for you. One of the great things about peer-to-peer is that it's a primary driver of new donor acquisition. So you're reaching people that you wouldn't have reached otherwise. I've had some organizations come back and say that 93% of their donors through one of their campaigns were new donors. So huge opportunity to drive new donors to your cause. And yeah, if you need an easy place to start with peer-to-peer, you can always start with your board members, because it depends. I know not all board members are excited to try something new and try setting up a personal page to share with their friends and family, but you'd be surprised at how great board members are when it comes to peer-to-peer and getting activated. And so I think that's a great jumping off point. Just a quick tip, if you are going to do peer-to-peer, I do recommend preparing a toolkit ahead of time to help your fundraisers promote their pages. So having some pre-written social media posts, pre-written emails, and maybe a content calendar for them to follow to help them get the word out about their personal pages. So now talking a little bit about virtual events. So Wild Apricot did a virtual event report in the middle of last year. And so it showed that 42% of nonprofits had already done a virtual event and 42% were planning one. So a total of 80 4% of survey respondents said they had either already run a virtual event or were planning to. So huge time for virtual events, of course, with so many in-person events canceled. But just to kind of back up a little bit and talk about what these virtual fundraisers typically look like if you haven't run one yet. So a virtual fundraiser is an online fundraising event. So instead of gathering together physically, your supporters can gather online via technology like live streaming, video, social media, plus some kind of digital fundraising software to raise funds online. So virtual fundraisers aren't new. This has been, of course, happening in the years past, but rapidly growing last year, and then, of course, sticking around for this year. And so the advantages of virtual fundraising are very similar to the advantages of fundraising today, where there's a lot lower event costs because you're getting rid of all of those extra costs that it takes to run a physical in-person event, like catering and locations and all of the above. And you also are getting a higher return on an investment and a higher return on your effort. And so there's a lot of ways that you can really take advantage of virtual fundraising for your organization. So just to kind of show, usually an in-person event costs between $30 and $50 to raise $100. While we see that digital fundraising on CauseVox, and I'm sure using Kindful tools as well, it's very similar. It costs about $3 to raise $100. So you're getting a much greater increase on your return on investment. And so we actually saw this with Summit Assistance Dogs. They usually had their in-person luncheon, and they transitioned that to a virtual luncheon last May. And one of the things that they were really surprised about is that they were actually able to engage more people than they typically do. So they usually had people purchase a table and invite their friends and family to come and join them. Instead, they kind of had these virtual tables using peer-to-peer fundraising and asked those that usually purchase the table to instead raise the funds, which I think it was $10,000 for a table, and promote their pages and the virtual event to their friends and family. And so they ended up spending about $50,000 less in event costs. And then they took home, as a result, $35,000 more than their in-person event. So their ROI increased from around 200% to over 1,600%. So they had an 8-time increase in return on investment. So I highly recommend virtual fundraising with whether you're trying to transition something that you typically did in person to virtual, like Summit Assistance Dogs did, or if you're trying something new and want to try a virtual fundraiser for the first time. Really important this year to consider these types of virtual fundraisers. And I just wanted to give you a closer look at what Summit Assistance Dogs did. They set up their page. It's very branded. They had a lot of details on the page about how they can, how individuals and table captains can get involved. They provided tons of resources. They had a challenge match. They had event sponsors. And most importantly, they engaged those virtual table captains to create their own personal pages and share with friends and family. So here's just an example from one of those virtual table pages. We've also seen a lot of virtual walkathons. So this has actually been maybe even above the virtual luncheon gala type fundraisers. We've seen so many of these virtual walkathons take place where people walk on their own. Sometimes they charge a registration fee and create a personal page to fundraise for the organization. And so this is actually very easy to run right now. So a great idea that you can incorporate into your plan as well. Couple other things that I've seen is virtual award celebrations. Of course, galas have been done virtually using some live streaming options and including peer-to-peer in those as well. And so we've seen so many of these virtual events do really well, and I think it's just such a huge opportunity for you to think through about how you can incorporate more virtual events this year. There's tons and tons of virtual fundraising ideas out there. You might want to do a virtual trivia night or just a simple happy hour, or do more of like a live stream focused event, but whatever you're doing, I highly recommend you thinking through a few creative options for your virtual fundraising. We also have a blog post with 23 virtual fundraising ideas with even more examples, so I can include that in the chat if anyone's interested. Okay, so now number 3 of what I recommend to schedule into your plans for this year is webinars and regular live streams. So I don't necessarily, sometimes a live stream is part of a virtual event, but I don't think a live stream in and of itself is a virtual event. And I've also seen webinars incorporated into nonprofits in some really great ways. So this has been a recent trend where there's been a huge increase in just from all the organizations that I chat with, where they're starting to do these regular webinars and live streams and incorporating them into their plans. And I've heard that it works well as both an acquisition strategy and a retention strategy. So I think if you want to stand out today, incorporating webinars and more live streaming is one of the biggest ways to stand out this year. So I think it's one of the most underused engagement strategies with your donors. So yeah, highly recommend you look into webinars and live streams to help you stand out. So there's a few benefits to webinars and incorporating them into your plans. So they're a great way to engage your existing audience and donors online. You might want to, even host regular, like let's say you do like a monthly happy hour where it's just, something like we're doing today, but just you can invite all of your donors online and just have an Ask Me Anything. So it's a great way to connect with your donors in a different medium and give them the opportunity to interact with you and learn more about your mission and what you're doing. You're also able to, it's just creating another avenue to engage with new potential donors as well. You might want to have some webinars that are specifically targeted at people that have just, kind of given you their email address or just engaged with you on social media. So having that kind of introductory kind of content and giving them a way to actually engage live with you is really powerful if you're just getting to know the organization and you as the donor have the opportunity to ask all of your questions that you have for the organization and how their funds could be used. And then it's also a great way to drive more online donations. So throughout all of these webinars, I mentioned Skid Row Housing Trust earlier. They're one of our customers, and one of the things that I saw them doing is that they did a monthly webinar that they invited just members in their community to. So some of their donors, some of their just even followers on social media, and just gave them the opportunity to ask them questions. And it was very laid back, kind of relaxed, engaged, like monthly webinar that they used to engage their audience and get them to hear a little bit more about what they were doing in the midst of COVID. And surprisingly enough, it actually helped them drive more donations. So they just were thinking of it as a retention play and just an engagement strategy. But through these webinars, they actually ended up driving a lot of donations as well, because people would, more stories they hear and the more they want to support your cause. So I think regular webinars are such a great opportunity. And of course, this is also goes along with live streaming and virtual events as well. So I want to talk a little bit more about this example from Dorcas Ministries, where they had this virtual breakfast. And a lot of these webinars don't even necessarily have to be live. I think it depends on what your goals are. So for something more of like a virtual event, you can do what Dorcas Ministries did and pre-record your whole live stream and then just set it live the day of. And so that's another way to kind of make it easier for you to manage, especially day of if it's tied in with a big fundraising initiative. So just a few tips for fundraising through webinars. You can launch a fundraising campaign like Dorcas Ministries did alongside of their live stream, or just even like a more targeted donation page. And I do recommend marketing that and putting the fundraiser out there even before your webinar is taking place if you're trying to fundraise through it. There's also, just the opportunity to make consistent calls to action. So if you are, again, trying to drive donations through that webinar, make sure that you're consistently asking people to donate throughout the presentation and pointing people to where they can do that. So if it's easy for them to navigate there, so including links in the live chat, sending a follow-up email with a link to donate if they didn't get to donate live, or just even including the link in the description underneath the YouTube live, for example. All of those are great ways that you can kind of put it out there and make fundraising easy through your webinars. Okay, so number 4, this is mainly an acquisition strategy, but I do recommend that you activate your corporate partners to fundraise at this time. So it's a great time to kind of tap into those businesses and corporate partners that either you already have connections with, or maybe try making some new connections within your community or through your board members if they have any connections at corporations. I think right now is a pivotal time for a lot of businesses to show that they're engaged and giving back. So I think it's a perfect time really to engage more corporate partners. There's a few ways that you can engage corporate partners. You can ask them to commit to a match. So if you are doing a virtual fundraising event or having another fundraiser throughout the year, you can ask them to match gifts even for a small portion of your overall goal. You can ask them to become a sponsor, of course, and incorporate them into that virtual event and showcase them on your page. You can also ask them to actually participate in peer-to-peer fundraising. So if they'll get their staff involved and get their staff to fundraise on your behalf, that's great because you're tapping into a whole new audience. You can get them to crowdfund for you. So providing them a digital campaign that they can promote to their audience to fundraise on your behalf. Or even simply just asking them if they can promote any online fundraising initiatives you're doing through their channels, just so you can really get in front of a new audience, and you'd be surprised at really how helpful that is. So I wanted to show you North Texas Food Bank. They do this where they've had actually over like 150 of these partner crowdfunding campaigns. It's super easy for them. They have this one template set up with their branding and their logo. And for each corporate partner that signs on and it says, hey, I want to fundraise for you, they just spin up a new crowdfunding site, replace the logo on the page, maybe change out a few details, and just provide these pages to their partners to fundraise for them. And it's actually been so successful. I think at this point they've raised millions through just this really simple way for their partners to crowdfund for them. So yeah, reaching whole new audiences through partners is a great way to drive donor acquisition. Okay, so I want to be mindful of the time. I might go a little quickly on these next few slides. So another great retention strategy is to focus on securing a second gift. So you did all this work to get a donor to make a gift for the first time, but again, you want them to stick around. So how do you do that? So 71% of donors feel more engaged when a nonprofit sends personalized content. So content that specifically speaks to the donor. So I found this chart really interesting where it says I would stop donating if the content was too vague. So meaning like it didn't really seem like they even knew who I was or what I was donating for. And the list goes on where there's, programs they're not interested in, it's dull and boring content. I think the tone of your communications is almost just as important as, the information you're telling. I would especially kind of use this to craft those communications where you want to make sure that your donors feel personally addressed and also that it is sort of targeted for them. So a lot of this comes with donor segmentation and sending communications that actually speak to donors as a first-time donor. So thank you for making your first gift. And all of this kind of ties back into taking that first-time donor on a long-term journey with you and getting them to stick around. And so there's a couple ways to do this. So thanking your donor within 48 hours made them 400% more likely to give again. So getting those donors thank yous right away is super, super important. And also a 3-minute thank you phone call in that 48-hour time period as well resulted in a 30% increase in retention. So thinking about those two things, it's really, really important that you communicate not just what you communicate to your donors and having that personalized content, but when you communicate to those donors. And donors that give again within the first 3 months tend to have a 2 times higher lifetime value than those that give once a year. So all of this to say that, focusing on securing a second gift should be one of the things that you make a priority this year, where, you can actually help drive engagement with those new donors that just come in by even just simply an automated receipt can go a long way to getting your donors to stick around, but also, of course, having phone calls, maybe having some video engagement. So whether you send a video thank you afterwards, or if you have like even a generic video pop up on the page as soon as your donor completes their donation and just makes them feel personally addressed to say thank you. It's just any way that you can engage with those donors, sending personal thank you notes, shouting new donors out on social media. All of these things can really help drive engagement and help you get that second gift. But I think one of the most important things in getting a second gift is actually having a nurturing series with a call to action at the end of that 90 days to help you drive that second donation. So here's just an example of like a mapped out nurturing journey where nurturing journeys, it's usually a combination of emails and other forms of communication. So maybe targeted social media ads, text messages, phone calls, all within that first 90 days of signing up, where you're really communicating with those new donors and getting them educated about their gift and how it made a difference, and just kind of keeping them in the loop. So nurturing journeys are a great way to help you secure those second gifts. All right, so number 6 is recurring giving. So recurring giving helps you increase gift size and also increase retention rates. So recurring donors tend to give 42% more annually than one-time donors, so you're getting that increased gift size. And recurring donors have a 90% retention rate as opposed to that 44 to 46% retention rate of one-time donors. Also, recurring giving grew 17% in 2019, so was definitely on the rise at the time, and I don't know what the new stats are, but definitely is something that we can still capitalize on in 2021. The great thing with recurring giving is that it helps you keep those donors and helps you sustainably fundraise. And so there's a few simple things that you can do to increase recurring giving. So ensuring that you have recurring giving as an option on that donation form. So kind of going back to that donation form optimization step. But recurring giving just on the form itself, or even consider having recurring giving be the first option. So in the mindset of the donor, they go to your page and they see, oh, I'm kind of expected to give monthly first. Like, that's really interesting, and that can help you drive and convert more recurring donors. You also might want to consider running a recurring giving campaign, so a short sprint of getting a lot of donors to sign on to make recurring gifts, and just engaging like a lot of those existing donors who have given at least twice in the past to instead make a recurring gift and doing some targeted outreach. So one of my favorite examples of this is Mortgage Professionals Providing Hope. They ran this recurring giving campaign. It was 30 days. They reached out to members in their community, those who have donated in the past, asked them to make a recurring donation, and once the campaign was over, the funds just keep charging every month. And yeah, they kind of know exactly what's coming in every month now through this recurring gift campaign. So could be a great way for you to drive more gifts throughout the whole year. Number 7 is matching. So matching gifts really do work to increase gift size 50% more when a match is in place. So what's great about matching gifts is that, of course, it helps you drive up those donations, but it also helps drive up urgency. So, you know, say you're running that virtual event fundraiser over a 30-day period, and in the middle, you know, sometimes it gets a little the donations taper off, there's a little less urgency. You can introduce a match midway, and then all of a sudden now there's a lot more urgency to make that gift. So not only does it drive up recurring donations, it also drive up donations, it also drives urgency. So there's a few ways to get a matching gift. I would, if you don't have a grant per se, I would ask your board and see if they could even, you know, participate in giving a portion of what you're looking to raise as a match. You can always follow up with a major donor and see if they would consider making a matching gift, or following up with a major donor who's already pledged a gift and ask if you can reposition it as a match. So if you know that this major donor gives $10,000 every year, you can say, hey, could we use that $10,000 as a match for this campaign? And most likely they'll say yes. And then you get to help drive up higher gifts that way. And of course, you can engage one of those corporate partners. One of my favorite examples of this is Skid Row Housing Trust. They did this $10,000 emergency challenge grant. So the bank committed to giving $10,000 and just challenged their community to match that. And so within 7 days, they made their goal, and it was just really high energy and helped drive higher gifts from what they saw. And lastly, so targeted asks. So this could go along with segmentation, but this is both a retention strategy and a strategy to increase gift size. So again, 71% of donors feel more engaged when they get personalized content. And 68% of donors agree that knowing how their donation makes an impact is really important to their gift. So one of the things that I recommend doing is doing a targeted ask strategy. Sometimes people call this like a step up campaign. There's different words for it, but it's basically segmenting out your donors based on their average gift size and setting goals for them for where you want them to be at the end of this year or at the end of the next 5 years. So let's say you want to take that $250 donor and grow them into a $1,000 donor in the next 5 years. What does it look like to actually get there? And kind of craft those communications around that. So you can craft a donation page that targets a specific gift size. So let's say you want to get your $250 donor to give $350. So what you're going to want to do is craft an email campaign, most likely, and maybe add some calls and other communications in there, but also drive them to a donation page that specifically has that $300 or $350 gift level on there. That also ties to impact again. So just like making sure that you're not just asking for higher gifts, but you're also communicating what that higher gift is going to help accomplish. And yeah, this is a great strategy to help you increase those gift sizes for your organization. So this is also great if you just can incorporate any kind of personalized outreach, personal emails, one-on-one emails, and further segmentation, especially based on those programs that those donors are interested in. So again, here's those different gift levels that you could map out for your donors to help them make the right decision of what their next gift size is going to be. And the better you can communicate impact, the more likely they are to actually increase their gift size. So if you're able to better communicate, you know, who is benefiting from this gift, how many people are benefiting, what, you know, is actually being donated to them, or what are the benefits that they're seeing with that gift, that's, you know, all the more likely to help drive higher gifts. So we actually saw that one organization that switched to this, they didn't change anything else about their donation form. They just added in these specific gift levels. It actually drove up a $100 increase in their average donation size. So you'd be surprised just like what communicating impact really does to help increase average gift size. So yeah, so those are my 8 recommended strategies to help you grow your fundraising in 2021. Thanks for hanging on with me. I know it was a lot of information all at once, a lot of statistics I threw at you. But yeah, I think if you can even pick out a few of these strategies to incorporate into your plans for this year, you'd be in a great spot. So thank you so much for sticking with me. If you're interested, we have this free fundraising planning guide. So it's actually a downloadable template and a calendar for you to use. And it's actually broken out into these 3 strategies, which is acquisition, retention, and gift size. And you can plug in all of the strategies that you want to use and your goals for them into this template. It's all sort of maps out for you. So it's really easy for you to kind of translate what we learned today into an actual calendar if you're interested. So you can check out that resource. And then for anyone who's looking to power up your next virtual fundraising campaign or run peer-to-peer or anything else, feel free to check out CauseVox, and you can always reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat, so you can always email me directly as well. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you hanging on with me today. And yeah, we can get into some questions.
Candace, this was all so good. There's so many of those tips that I think, and I wanted to echo your point. Like, I think a lot of people might be watching, might feel like overwhelmed by so many things you can try. And I think like your most recent point there at the end about like pick one of these and try it maybe this year, not thinking that you have to do all of them because it's a lot. And like one of those plans can maybe significantly increase your retention, funds raised, things like that. Like even planning a really good peer-to-peer campaign is a big undertaking, right? And so there's so much good stuff there. So we've got some pretty good questions that came in. We've got about 9 minutes here. So we're going to try to run through some of these. Got Candace, just so you know, I'll go ahead and hit this on the head. Got so many thank yous and highlights on how good the content was. So that's awesome to see. But let's jump into a couple of these. I've flagged just a couple, sorry, and now I've lost them. So we're going to kind of bounce all over the place. So
Sure.
first off, we had a question and kind of a couple questions around this theme, but was in-person events have sponsors. Do you have thoughts on engaging partners as sponsors for like virtual events? Have you seen that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen sponsorships actually work really well for virtual events, but it does look a little bit different, of course, than those in-person events. So if you are doing a live stream, this is what I've seen a lot of nonprofits do. If you're doing a live stream, you can actually give like those sponsors little segments. Like Parkinson's Nebraska, they did a virtual walkathon, they had a live stream, and so they actually gave each of their sponsors like 30 seconds to chat about their business and what they do on their live stream. So they had like little commercial breaks and gave their sponsors the spotlight, so they were still able to engage those sponsors and just have them have a presence in their virtual event. Also great ways to highlight sponsors are also just even as simple as uploading their logo on whatever page that you're using to fundraise. So, you'd be surprised how people are responsive, and those sponsors are probably going to be responsive to even just having their logo on your page. It's a great way to acknowledge them. Trying to think of what other, you can always work out something with highlighting sponsors and giving them access to your attendees, maybe providing them your list of event attendees and giving them access to shoot out an email to them. That is, another way that you can engage a sponsor and sort of have some benefits for those sponsors. Yeah, that's just a few tips that I've seen some organizations do.
Oops, I was muted. So I think this is a really good question and something that I've heard a lot and I've thought about a lot being in the role I'm in. But do you feel like we're starting to see some virtual fatigue? And how do you start thinking about, the difference between with vaccination rates going up and things like that? Like, how do you start thinking about like if you plan to do a fall event, the idea between in-person and virtual? Like, I know it's a really tough thing, but what advice would you give someone who's trying to figure that out?
Yeah. So it is kind of constantly shifting. So I don't know that I know any better than you, but I will say what, because I have this question come up all the time with the nonprofits that I chat with. So I usually plan for virtual first and then sort of have some backup plans if you can do in person. I think there's also this kind of weird time that we're in where it's not necessarily about what's allowed, but also about what people are comfortable with. So if you kind of have an older community and you know that they're maybe not going to be out and about right away, even if they can be, kind of accommodating to that. So a lot of the organizations that I've chatted with recently that are planning things like later in the year are also considering like hybrid approaches. And actually, that's even some like Summit Assistance dogs that you saw with their virtual luncheon. They said even when they can have an in-person luncheon again, they're going to do it hybrid anyway because they reached so many more people. So they're still going to have that live stream and online components, but also like have some kind of in-person event as well. So it kind of like catches both options. And then, should things, have to go all virtual, then you're already like kind of prepared for that. So yeah, it's kind of a hybrid approach, I think is a good one.
Yeah, and one other thing to add to that, is maybe just ask your donors, like
Yeah.
send an email out and say, hey, we, we're really trying to figure out what we think is the best tact here, and we'd love for your feedback and your candid feedback on what you'd like to see from the organization. Would you like to see us have an in-person event? Would you like, and obviously you're going to get feedback on both sides, but you might be surprised that you get an overwhelming amount of feedback that helps you understand better what decision to make, right? Instead of
Yeah.
toiling over it. Or to Candace's point, maybe it points that you really do need a hybrid approach. So let's see, a couple others. You talked some about, doing webinars and content and things like that. What are your thoughts on doing a pre-recorded webinar or video in place of like an actual live webinar?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely circumstances that works really well. Um, Again, it just depends on what your goals are, I think. So if you're doing like a virtual fundraising event, like having like some kind of presentation, you can definitely do a pre-recording with some stories and have like a video prepped ahead of time um, for something that people are just kind of supposed to watch. So if your goal is to get people to watch something and hopefully make a donation, you can probably do it that way. But I will say, if you're having people live, you do want to engage with them in one way or the other. So either like, even if it is all pre-recorded, like having some activity in the chat, having some, live things for people to engage with is great. Um, but also I see a lot of nonprofits do a little bit of both, where they'll do like kind of like today, we, come on, say, hey, everybody, play the recording, and then at the end, have a live Q&A kind of component as well. So you can kind of do a mix of both if it's a lot to kind of get all of that content um, live at once, and you can, kind of have it both ways.
Okay. Well, I know we're right up at the top of the hour,
Hmm.
and well, like I said, got great feedback. Candace, appreciate so much of your time. I just wanted to ask one last question. A couple people had asked how they could get in touch with you. So if someone has a
Yeah.
question or wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach you? And how can they get in touch with CauseVox? I know you've already said it a couple times, but just to leave this presentation with, what's the best way to reach Candace and CauseVox if they'd like to learn more about you or your software?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just pasted in the chat. You can email me at candace@causevox.com, or you can also just go to causevox.com if you want to check out our product or our other resources. We have tons of free webinars and tons of blog posts and content. And yeah, so feel free to explore all of that. And yeah, anyone that has more questions or would like to connect with me one-on-one, please shoot me an email. I'd be happy to connect. If you have more questions as well, you can always email our support team too, but feel free to shoot me an email directly. I'd be happy to connect with you.
All right. Well, hey, thanks so much, Candace. Get a little bit of rest and get your energy back from the vaccine. And we will, glad you're able to get that and that's rolling out. For everyone who attended and stuck with us for the hour, thanks so much. And I hope this was helpful, and happy fundraising to everyone. Have a good rest of your, I believe it's Tuesday. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you all. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. All right.
Thanks,
Take
Candace.
care. Have a
Bye-bye.
good day. Bye.